do the camera. Hi, this is John Firth, and I'm sitting here with Dale, a good new friend of mine, and he's going to be talking with me about individual performance and how individual performance becomes organizational performance and the elements of it. And there's a little surprise that he and I discovered on Monday that we're going to talk about right now, which is the models, the performance models. And we developed them separately. Dale developed his about 10 years ago. I developed mine about 3 or 4 years ago. And I just want to show you how we actually come to a meeting of minds with the model. So this is not the way it's supposed to start. So it always starts with us as human beings. And I always talk about it in terms of the hardware, the external world or the external being, or not the external being, how we look, our hair, our skin color, our eye color, tone of voice, musculature, and so forth, are things that can only be changed with some sort of medical intervention, as opposed to our software, which is really the brain, the central nervous system, which for a lot of reasons you'll see is not only the heart of performance, but it's the heart of who we are, but it can also be much easier changed. You don't need medical intervention. You need some mental intervention in some cases. You need some training and discipline. But this is the part that, like any software, you can upgrade, you can change out, and so forth. And in my model, then, I go to the results, because any performance model obviously has to result in some sort of results. And in this case, it can be building a family, making money, maybe starting a company, but then little things like just passing an exam or preparing for a presentation. These are all the kind of results that we all sort of aspire to, at least those of us in business and in corporate culture and organizations. So there's a gap, though, between who we are, our core beliefs and mindsets and states of being, and the results that we aspire to, because our results are aspirational. We don't yet have them. We're not doing things. We're not being our results yet. So they're not integrated. So what stands between our beliefs, mindsets, and states of being that makes us who we are and the results we want to achieve? And that's the external world, the external constituents in my model. And this is everything from your family, these are also your programmers, so your parents, your friends, how you digest personal experiences. Personal experiences are how you perceive what's happened in the external world vis-a-vis you and your results, and then somehow make it part of who you are. And that's the process of bringing the results together. But you have to go through the external world. And this is, again, your family, friends, colleagues, people that you know and you can control somewhat, as opposed to, say, the government or media, or even worse, life events and global events, where most of us have absolutely no control over what happens, but they can have significant effects on our performance, on our organizations, and on our businesses. And how do we get through these? We get through this external mishmash of conflicting agendas and ideas through the decisions we make and the actions we take and how we communicate. So I'm going to leave it with this. Again, this is all the personal, the individual. So Dale, I'm going to let you take over with your introduction and tell us a little bit about how this becomes corporate or organizationalized, if you will.
Excellent. Thanks, John. Dale Daniels here. And either good morning or good afternoon, depending upon whereabouts you are out there. The discussion is always apropos, but if you know what's going on in the world these days, being able to adjust to the external environment, as John was talking about, as an individual is extremely important. I'm going to take the same concepts and convert them into more the organizational environment. Again, as John had mentioned, we built these models separately, but they're very much the same. And my model of the organizational performance is similar to individual, and the main difference being that as an individual, how you get your results is fundamentally driven by your skills and competence you have. For an organization, I start at that same core. It's the principles, values, and beliefs that the organization holds. And how that manifests itself throughout the organization starts off firstly as what are the motivations that we as leaders or the rest of the organization want to move forward with. What takes us to the next step? And based on our business model, we will have as an organization our core competence. What do we do? What's our why? Where are we headed to? Those sorts of questions, which frame our behaviors.
Right. So I just wanted to step in really quickly. The big difference between the individual, from my point of view, and the organizational, if you will, is the fact that this is largely consciously manufactured, as opposed to the individual, which is highly unconscious. Big pieces of it are highly unconscious and requires some observation, some learning, some self-reflection to make the unconscious. This one is all consciously planned from beginning to end. If it's a good leader and an organization that really has been built properly. So that for me is probably the principal big difference.
And that's absolutely true. Rather than being victims of the circumstances, as could be, organizations try to frame their own world.
Right.
How are we going to carve our niche? The same question comes up, John. Why are we not achieving the extraordinary results? And as this event
I think the important thing is why do we feel we may not be? Often it's just some sort of a feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Or in the worst case,
as individuals, we have a feeling. And again, it's a little more conscious in organizations because they'll have KPIs, or they'll have indicators that they're not performing.
And today's automation and intelligence and those sorts of things drive us to be monitoring everything and everyone
all the time.
Yeah, all the time. So the main difference is in this central piece. If you want to get people to do their best, absolutely the best, people who are thriving will be more engaged, be more innovative, and drive extraordinary results. When you do more, you actually get them to do with their mind and their hearts and their hands. So substantially different than just what we can do with our hands. From an organization,
this is why I always talk about mindset and mindfulness, which has become such a phrase of the 21st century, because that really is what we're talking about. Is when you're mindful of yourself and others, then this is a sort of construct that you can use, because it really is about the mind.
Truly it is. And when it comes to an organization, one of the ways that you can, probably in my estimation, the most important thing to do is develop an employee value proposition that places you and your brand in the marketplace. Completely different than the rest of the market. Completely different, particularly of your organization's competitors.
Yep.
The model in the middle here is similar to Maslow's hierarchy, of course. So the bottom in an employee value proposition, simply stated, is why the heck would anybody come and work for your organization? It articulates, the benefits and the compensation. Of course it does.
It's interesting because I went through something like this with a client yesterday.
Okay.
And said that we had gone through the business model, but what he hadn't really thought about was the outside world, the competitors. You mentioned it, that it has to be substantially different than your competitors, because one, you're substantially different as the founder and business owner, but also your clients expect something different. So we went through all of this. It's a pity I didn't have this model yesterday. He's a smart guy, and we've worked a long time together. But this one would have just sort of nailed it, I think, because he had a lot of this already placed, and he really worked hard in getting his personnel model down. It was quite a journey for him. So sorry, I keep interrupting, but fascinating.
No. It is a discussion, John. It is a discussion.
Which I should say is there's also a comment box for those of you who are listening in. So please say hi or ask us a question, as we're going through this.
So the bottom part of the model of the employee value proposition, that's just the table stakes. Most places really focus an awful lot of energy on this, but it's what is known as hygiene factors. If they're not there, people are going to leave. Once you start, exactly. Once you start to move up the conversation and you get into the middle bands, you start to think about ways that you can deploy people so that they get opportunity. And that means more than just, I'm going to send you off to a training. Training is an important component, but developmental deployment is probably more successful than because it's experiential.
And it's also, I think also I would say the employee is co-creating the opportunity, because it's not necessarily that it's even sometimes explicitly said. It's often just we either have a career path, but you can self-determine where you want to go. We'll be following your performance and your competencies and how they grow. But 10 years from now, we can't tell. You may be the head of a business unit, or you might be a staff person. You don't know. So I like that, the fact that training is just provides a basis, but it's the opportunity. I have another client who I keep trying to explain. He's trying to hem in the growth of his core business. And I said, you're having problems keeping good people. I said, you're going to be cutting off their interest in progressing and getting better, and therefore seeing this as an opportunity if you don't expand.
Right.
If you don't expand, you're going to start seeing your employees you're just not going to get the good employees. I don't care what anybody says, whether they're truck drivers or, accountants or head of HR. You're just not going to get them because the opportunities will not grow.
Well, that's the whole concept behind, cultivating your own employer brand. Who your organization is out in the marketplace will determine who you can attract as staff, who you attract also as customers, which is equally as important, of course.
Yeah,
the
because
idea
people often want to interface with a certain kind of person. In this case, this is a in the food industry, and he has very famous restaurateurs as his core clients. Well, it must be a head rush for quite a number of his employees to be able to interface with an Eric Repair or a Bouli, or names that are very well known in the industry. And when you choose to be in the food industry, this client of mine is pretty much clear upwards towards the top
right.
in price and in product. So clearly that's something that attracts his employees.
Well, and that's at the top of this pyramid in terms of the development of an employee value proposition. This is the main differentiators.
Mm-hmm.
You buy people in, not because you are throwing checks out, pointing cash on the table, but because you now have won their heart, and they will bring their brains as well, because now they've got purpose. And this is particularly, important for millennials and Gen Z. They seem to be less.
Yeah, I have to say, when I look back in my career, I actually followed the same pattern, and we're both baby boomers, so maybe Gen Z, but I think it's fairly evergreen, something we know better about now, but I think it's pretty much one of those great principles of business. They come for the money, but they pay for the core values and the purpose.
Yeah, the money becomes those, the hygiene factor. Can I still afford my place? Can I buy my groceries? But equally as important, they'll forego some dollars in order to be able to feel purpose.
Yep.
And that, if you can understand the power of that, you will understand where we're trying to get to with ordinary people who can actually achieve extraordinary things, because they will.
And that's a key part, is you have to be committed to this concept. A lot of younger, especially younger, even though they're Gen Z, some of the more hot-shotty, investment banking types, and a lot, there are, I guess, two kinds of business owners, business business owners. I'm going to call it business owners because that's what I primarily work with. And it's those who buy into this 100%. Some of them go even overboard and forget that they actually do have to have like good financial systems and so forth. And then others who think it's all about the systems, and if everything's functioning well and the money's good, they don't have to worry about this. So if I can say those, there's two big generalizations. Obviously, there's a big middle where people get the balance right. But I get very frustrated when this is kowtowed to, or they give lip to it. They sort of go along with it, but they're not bought into the concept.
Absolutely. The contrary to that sort of situation, I was speaking with a leader of a global technology. It's a very diverse, integrated, vertically and horizontally organization. It's massive.
Mm-hmm.
And we were having a dialogue about why in this individual's shop, like it's a large part of the organization. Their
Mm-hmm.
turnover rate in technology is about 3%.
That's damn good. That's very good.
And I said, well, what is your secret sauce? What are you doing? He said, it is this concept that people buy into what we're doing here. It's
Mhm.
exciting. It's
Mhm.
leading edge. It
Mhm.
gives them purpose.
Yep.
We don't ask people to stay late. We don't ask people to take work home, but they deliver. They are extremely innovative. People are bought in.
Yep.
And the
Yeah.
leader told me, he said, I could take away. We have foosball tables and pinballs and we have, draft beer in the lunchroom. Great facilities outside. You can go out on campus.
Mhm.
I could take that all away, and I know
Mhm.
these people will still do the delivery at this level.
Yep.
This is some nice to haves, but it's the mindset that is driving the organization to new levels.
Right. Yeah. It's a fun. Yeah. Exactly. Coming back to my model, which is the core beliefs and the mindset. I guess yours as well. That if you've got the core beliefs and your purpose really clearly defined and it resonates with your clients and with your those who are going to become your employees, then the results you're looking to achieve become less intimidating. So to take mine, because you've lined everything up in terms of having the right beliefs and purpose, having a mindset of we can do it. It makes your mindset also much more positive because you feel good about what you're doing and you want to be part of this. And then your states of being then is then where you can start, or the leaders can start challenging the workforce or the team to do even more and increase their skill levels, but also the performance of themselves and the organization. And the stuff that flows in between almost becomes second nature. At some point, you're making good decisions, you're doing the right thing because you're so in the zone. I think that's for me when in the zone takes place, is when those things are in place. And then you can get the whole organization in the zone or in flow.
Truly, that's exactly it. I'm going to show you a graph next, and I'll describe it a little bit for you and the rest of the folks online here. And then I want us to dialogue this not only in the context of the real impact this means for organizations, and from your perspective, that individual, how does this line up with the dialogues that we've been having so far? So,
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, good.
yeah. So this graph, when I'm talking about building an employee value proposition and a brand, there's a whole bunch that goes behind that. You have to have processes and policies and systems and technology that help you achieve what you've been just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get to that extremely successful organization with extraordinary outcomes?
Mm-hmm.
So this shows a graph. The dark line in the middle, normative curve, just everybody's familiar with that. Most organizations adopt some kind of a skewed version of the distribution. This is a distribution of performance ratings from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest and 5 being, clearly outstanding and exemplary.
And these you got from Glassdoor, for example. I think we had talked about Glassdoor being a primary source of information.
Glassdoor and the middle one is the conference board. A lot of organizations still use forced distributions.
Mhm.
So when you're doing your performance review, and you can see on the bottom there, those who are below, you're forced into having something like 6% of the individuals who
Mhm.
are 2 or 1 performers.
Right.
Everybody falls into 3 performers, 66%, with a 27.5% in the superior performance range.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. That actually, again, this is the first time I've seen these charts, and they immediately sort of, I can see where some of the beliefs I had about my team when I had a fairly high performing team, and why I had so few below average performers, and I had so many average performers. And then you'd have a couple where you say, wow, they're really, they're going to get full bonus. They've got great career paths. This is, a born consultant, because it was consulting I was leading. As opposed to those where you get the impression they could maybe leave the industry. They're not so bought in at it. They're not the greatest performers. But it's interesting, the distribution. I never saw this before. It's fascinating.
And why this is important for individuals and for corporations. I'm going to talk to the corporation, and then I'm going to ask you some questions from the individual.
We have a question from a LinkedIn user, but I'll let you finish and then we'll ask it.
Okay. The concept of superior performer, someone who is a 3 performer, they are the average performer. They are achieving what you have asked them to achieve, meeting expectations.
Mm-hmm.
A 4 performer actually outperforms a 3 performer 150%. Now, that doesn't mean they put in more time.
Right.
More explicitly, they're more effective, more efficient. They are more innovative. They bring more to the table and impact the outcomes of the organization. Their contribution is higher. Now, someone who is at the low end of a 5 outperforms a 3 performer about 300%.
Right.
And those individuals who are your 90th percentile of your performers will outperform 3 performers as much as 400%.
Wow.
So from an organization's perspective, to be able to move the dial as 1/2 standard deviation to that last graph on the right, from a normal curve, represents magnificent returns for the organization. As you can imagine, the more people who are performing at this kind of level. The unfortunate thing that happens in organizations, a disproportionate amount of leaders' time, whether they're direct supervisors, managers, or up the food chain into the C-suite, they're spending far too much time on the underperformers. And we're spending too much time on the problems. And
I could not agree.
Yeah. The cost, as you can imagine, the cost of inaction to move the dial on this stuff, move the dial on getting people's hearts and minds involved in this is extraordinary.
Yeah.
And if you're not,
no, keep going.
As leaders, without jumping in, making it possible for people to buy into what you're doing, to get their heart, so that they understand the principles, the values that the organization about, and buy in, and they can have purpose as an individual.
Yeah.
If you don't, the outcomes, the cost is lower productivity, increased turnover rates, as well as maybe even the failure of the organization.
Yep. And it's interesting you talk about the heart, and I don't think we always mean warm, happy familial feeling. It means that you resonate with them on some level. So, when you join a bank, when you decide to become a banker, they're not the most warm and fuzzy, or the lawyers, or so forth. But what a bank offers somebody who's, I guess, fascinated with money,
Absolutely.
that motivates them. When you offer a lawyer the chance to become partner and become really excellent at something, become recognized as an expert, that resonates with them, because that's kind of how they've been wired through their education, and then starting out as a lower level employee, lower level lawyer, and so forth. As opposed to, say, in a manufacturing thing, or a healthcare organization, healthcare provider. You're going to have a little bit more of a heart with a healthcare provider than a resonance with goals and so forth.
Yeah. And you and I had talked when we first met. There's a central core living that people who are involved in venture capital, they're frequently not warm, fuzzy folks.
No, they're not. They tend to be very driven.
Very
Which
driven.
means if you don't have a driven, or you don't have some, I think in the McKinsey model, which is very refined, up or out, that really says those who stay at McKinsey are born consultants. They're partner level. They're going to be working at the highest levels of the clients, and not everybody wants it. That they really force the issue and say, you either want what we do, you're going to make some good money. You might make more money doing something else, but you're going to make quite a lot of money. You're going to be a McKinsey partner, which counts for something. These are mostly MBA graduates. And likewise, somebody who wants the familial small company feel, really get to know people, they're going to wither and die in that sort of hyper achiever or super achiever or overachiever environment. So we have this question, Dale.
Yes.
What is the best way to measure the performance of employees? Now, I have to assume who's asking this, it's more of a technical question than it is how do you measure performance of employees?
And this is the $1 million question, of course, and it really does line up back to the original model that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
You can flow right from the core. What are your values about as an organization? And by the way, Leah, thank you for posing the question.
Yeah, because that's a big part of motivation, is also knowing that you're being measured in a way that reflects why you're in the organization too.
Absolutely. So everybody does talk about the very first thing that needs to happen is you have to tell people what you expect.
Yep.
So from an individual's perspective, if you want them to fail, don't tell them what your expectations are, and they'll fail 100% of the time.
Oh God, yeah. And that, for many business leaders, that sounds like dreary work to constantly affirm what is expected of them, especially in an organization maybe growing and changing. I find when I dig deeper in some of these performance issues, it's because they haven't really spent time with the employees in a very organized fashion to explain to them what the expectations are, and let it trickle down through the management ranks and middle management. It's sometimes surprising to me that happens, or it doesn't happen, as it were.
It doesn't happen. That's the main key, that it's an annual review conversation that I'll tell you, even in some major firms that I've been involved in, my conversation with my own personal performance reviews was more about managing the rest of the organization and nothing about me.
Yeah, well, and it's becoming
yeah.
So right, because it really becomes you are the standard bearer for the organization as the leader.
Absolutely.
And after all, organization is about people. It's people.
And if you've done your right amount of due diligence in bringing the right fit into your organization, the comfort level with having regular dialogues about firstly setting those expectations, making sure the expectations are not only bought in, they're about, number one, moving the organization towards its objectives.
Right.
Not only your work unit, not only individual, everything's got line of sight. But it does take into consideration the individual's desires. Where do I want to be when I grow up?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where do I want to see myself? And it may or may not even be in the organization, but a good supervisor who has an outstanding person who's
Yeah.
working for them, they will go out that extra yard and help that individual so that their performance expectations will include things, for an example, like what are your community commitments? What
Mhm.
is the value? Maybe it's your turn to lead this social responsibility project
Mhm.
that we're doing, inner housing or environmentalists or environmental sustainability.
Right.
So that's where you're, again, right even at that point of talking about performance, we're buying the person's heart, you know.
And then on a pure technical level, what is the best way to measure performance of employees is you give them some hard numbers they have to achieve. If they're a line manager or they have a business unit, obviously revenue and profitability are key measurements of performance. If you're in a staff position, it tends to be around the budget that you have to maintain if you're providing a service to the line managers. And then, I don't think I ever worked for an organization that had explicit KPIs, like you have to hit this one. Again, when I was in industry, as we called it, I was a staff person. I was chief of strategy, head of strategy, which is a staff position. When I was in consulting, I was a partner, and that was more of the line sort of thing. And there, in consulting, it really boiled down to your sales contribution, your managing a project successfully contribution, i.e., having teams that will do it well, and your contribution to the furtherance of the firm. And those will be a little harder because you have a budgeting process where numbers become the focal point at the end when you have the budget, plus initiatives you may lead. So best way to measure performance is to have some hard indicators, usually in finance or some sort of KPI around operations, if that's what you're in control of or going to base your performance. And then there's the softer, some of the things that you mentioned. Are you really performing in a qualitative way that we can feel, that we can see? Your motivation's high, you coach people, you bring people along, you're a leader. Or a burgeoning leader. But I always had combinations of the harder stuff and some of the softer stuff. And depending on the organization, some had a little more hard, some had a little more soft.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And it boils down to that the idea of what is the organization about? What is the organization's why?
Mm-hmm.
And a while ago, I was working with a petrochemical organization,
Mm-hmm.
massive
Mm-hmm.
petrochemical plants. And they told me that they had 291 key performance measures.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was my response as well.
Oh my God. Just
Yeah.
the complexity of that.
And some of them were very, very operational.
Yeah.
And it's important when you're running, a petrochemical plant that you're keeping your eye on a lot of this stuff on a day-to-day basis. So about 40 to 50% of those metrics were monitored at least hourly. So that
You're
tells you,
kidding.
they're telling you that that's not a very strategic activity. It's
No,
important, of course.
Yep.
It's important.
So I go through a strategic planning exercise, what I call mini one, with my group, the North Star group of business owners. And it's basically they have to tell me what they've decided in their company is going to be their financial numbers. That's easy. And then they have to choose for themselves 3 or 4 KPIs that they need to follow. Everything else is subsidiary to these 3 or 4. It forces the hand of them to understand really what is driving this business. But that means it's not always, it's sometimes hard numbers like average customer lifespan would be one. How long, lengthening the loyalty of a customer. It could be acquisition costs, client acquisition costs. But that's where it gets really specific to the industry and to the individual who's building this business. But yes, 4 is maybe really hard ass, get it to the core of what the numbers are. But anything more than like 15 or 20, and it just becomes an exercise in intellectual blah blah blah. It really does. I've had CEOs here show me their great KPI, this and that, and I'm like, do you have any idea which are the important ones that you as the leader need to be focused on? No, they just have maps of the KPIs.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, it's not a lot of organizations, a lot of industries require that they have some measurements that are going on a regular basis. But in order to run the organization straightforward, go back to this petrochemical organization, their number one cost line was the cost. And it fluctuates dramatically of natural gas.
Yeah. That's one of those. In my model, you have very little control over. Now, if you're smart and you understand the futures markets for your products, you'll lock in all sorts of futures contracts. You'll be a little smarter, but those are the events that when an oil refinery blows up, when we have the Exxon Valdez, nobody planned that.
No, exactly right.
Right.
And that's why you help organizations to understand what it is that they need to be really paying attention to it. And in that circumstance, you're talking right. Like, how do we mitigate the risk through the use of derivatives in the commodities marketplace, so that you can mitigate that cost fluctuation? And we were talking like billions of dollars worth of fluctuation based on the cost.
Well, speaking of the Exxon Valdez, is it the Exxon? No, the one BP caused. I forget what exactly that spill was, but I think about 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It was a major disaster. And I happened to have met and gotten to know the CIO of the organization, or CTO, I forget what it is. He actually signed my book. It was one of my testimonials, Dana Veasley. And he went on to be the CIO. Yeah, he was the CIO of BP. And then he went to JP Morgan Chase, and then he went to the Department of Defense. And that's when he I think he's now retired or semi-retired. But he, when he told me and a friend of mine, our mutual friend, about what had to happen in 24 hours of that spill, and how he rallied they needed 2,400 computers to monitor the situation. They didn't have 2,400 computers that they could easily requisition. He was on the phone with, at that time, Lou Gerstner of IBM, Steve Jobs, all the computers, because he needed that computing power. And he had a staff that was with him, that stayed with him and worked hard. Some of them worked 2 days straight. That's performance. That's when the employees are really aligned with the organization, what the organization needs, regardless of whether or not they've got it in their contract or what they're getting paid. When you can buy that, so I think that's what you're really talking about, the end goal. If you get that kind of commitment from employees for the organization, then you've won.
Yeah. So it's a great example. I think maybe what you're talking about was that the leak from a deep sea platform. Yeah. So in that sort of circumstance, trying to go back to the conversation about getting people, their hearts and souls and minds involved into these conversations, having someone who actually has some commitment to, things like the environment, to the safety of humans, buying into this kind of action, as opposed to how do we cover now, the backsides. It's about how do we save the environment? How do we save people? Those sorts of things. It's a completely different mindset. And guess which one gets you the better outcome?
The mindset of sustainability. And it's interesting you say that, though, because and this may just be a reflection of my values, but there's a certain pride that suddenly evolves. The pride that you work for a great organization doing great things. It's almost like, we talked about the heart and so forth. I think at the end of the day, the reason why I take it back. The pride is, I think, the superficial. You're proud. You mentioned, I'm an IBM executive, or, I started as employee number 100 at Microsoft or something. And there's a pride, and that's important. But to do something like the BP spill, or I'm thinking of the Taj Mahal. Remember when it was attacked in India, the hotel, very high-end hotel, and how employees took bullets for the company, literally took bullets. That goes beyond even pride. That's willing to sacrifice your life, or people in military, or people in government, or the Secret Service when they protected Reagan when he was shot. That one guy threw himself in the way of the bullet. That's the sort of stuff that goes way beyond pride and having the right KPIs and resonating getting heart. It is motivating people to get into action when what they believe in and what they're connected to is worth risking their lives for.
I 100% agree. And the concept of extraordinary comes from so many different angles, as you described. The ultimate
extraordinary. Extraordinary.
That's it, exactly. And my own belief, and maybe this is back to you now, my own belief is that the extraordinary can come from people who themselves think themselves to be ordinary.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And in fact, that's another key. I had another client who humbleness was very important to his performance. He believed very strongly. There was a lot of indicators to say that was indeed a good mindset to have, humbleness. And when people have humbleness, the ego doesn't come forward quite as strongly as it does in some organizations. I think of Uber, where Travis Kalanick was big ego, big person, and the organization didn't survive under him because he was just too. They finally had to get rid of him because he had the wrong mindset for a sustainable organization. It was great for a startup, but it and Uber took years for the business model to play out properly, so they made money, and they only made money by increasing the rates. I mean, it wasn't exactly the hardest thing in the world to do, but Kalanick was absolutely not able to take that organization to the next level and get then the performance by virtue of even just generating shareholder value. He wasn't even able to do that. Yeah, so.
But we've come to a very interesting turn in the in our current position in the industrialization, where there's an awful lot of factors that come into this. But I'm going to take you back to the 90s, where everything was about the quarterly results, and the individual that I had made mention that you and I talked about, John, it was announced that the individual's annual salary was $80 million. And then 8 or 10 weeks later, they laid off 120,000 people globally. And that was commonplace.
Yeah, no. Well, I often think about the 70s, and I think we're about the same age. And I remember, the hyperinflation. We think things are chaotic and disruptive right now. I would say the 70s were as disruptive differently. But people going bankrupt, employee layoffs were almost the order of the day. You almost just expect it at some point. You just don't hear that these days. For one thing, we're more of a service economy, and it's easier in a service economy to be able to reduce costs quickly and not necessarily have to lay people off. It's much more flexible. But, that sort of stuff, it's, the business cycle is no longer a 7-year cycle. It's a 18-year, 20-year cycle, and even then the downturn can be very minimal. Yeah.
And I think we have to watch. There is a change in mindset. There is a change in the guard. We are on the sidelines, the talking heads sometimes, and the younger generations are driving some of these changes, which I think are very positive. But there are still times. There's still peaks of it. There was an announcement, I think it was last week or the week before, thousands of layoffs, and the organization was reaching record profits.
Oh, I know. It's so dissonant, and it's so hard. And I think it takes real mental fortitude and fitness to be able to continue. Be able to hold two contrary thoughts. I forget what that's called again. But that you can love and respect and be proud of an organization and still commit yourself to it, despite some of these weird ass things that objectively either don't make sense, or why would somebody want to be part of that at the end of the day? And that's that intellectual dissonance, I think, where you hold two different thoughts and they're equally valid.
And if it rubs against you, it's called cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So
at the end of the program, I was trying to forget my word. Yes, cognitive dissonance. Thank you.
And that goes again. We keep you coming back to the model. In order for people to be extraordinary, to get extraordinary results, you have to be, bought. Your soul, if you will.
Yeah.
Your mind, your heart, your hands are all working in the same direction.
Right.
But if there's something that is fundamentally, I left an organization earlier in my career and got into the consulting world. It was a financial institution.
Uh-huh.
I had a very high level of service orientation.
Mm-hmm.
Highly profitable, where my divisions were highly profitable.
Uh-huh.
Yet I got a written criticism that my people were giving too good a customer service.
Oh, well, yeah.
It had to do with,
that's cognitive.
Yeah, cognitive dissonance. Within 2 weeks, I was out of there. I just said, all these signs. The guy who was in my office across the table from me, I said, "Look at the sign behind me. It talks about how we're different." And
I know.
On every corner of that particular intersection was a financial institution. I said, "There's nothing keeping people here other than how we treat them, because our interest rates are the same."
Yep. Yeah. No. I mean, that's in some ways, banking. I started my business career at Deutsche Bank, and it is hard to differentiate financial institutions. At Deutsche Bank, it was really the credit rating that the bank had and the ability to get lower interest loans. It kind of began, at least on the commercial banking side, it kind of began and ended that. And then you had the guys who were building the businesses who developed relationships. So it was like, all right, low interest loans and good relationships with your clients. And that was sort of the beginning and the end of all of, at least that was my experience of banking. As opposed to, say, in pharmaceuticals, where there's much more complex things, because you've got science, you've got very educated people. The innovation is very high in pharmaceuticals. It's probably the most innovative in the true sense of the word innovation. We lived and died as a pharmaceutical company, your ability to bring innovative products out, which required a lot of brain power and a lot of big organizations working together. That, I think, was the most innovative. And basically, I don't think there are very many people in the pharmaceutical industry who want to be bankers, and I doubt there are a lot of bankers that want to go into the pharmaceutical industry.
It's a different world, that's for certain.
Yeah. So thank you, Dale. We're coming up on, I like to keep these about 45 minutes. Any last thing you'd like to say to our audience?
Just keep it real. If you're looking to achieve where you're wanting to go individually, listen to your heart and your head. If you're an organization,
and probably an outside advisor would help.
Yes, of course. Of course.
No, but I don't mean it cynically. I do mean it that myself, I always expected a firm to pay for my coach, and they never would. And I never got coaching. Now that I'm a coach and have seen my own journey, and I sort of wish I had a coach. You need an objective third party to be able to call you out on things, to have you see things you just can't see because you're in the middle of it and so forth.
Psychological scotoma. It's where the blind spots are. You don't know, right?
Oh, really? I need to write that down. I never knew the technical. Now I remember cognitive dissonance, though.
But that's the exact same thing on the other side. When you're in the throes of things, most people, currently, while I have worked with multinationals and tens and thousands and hundreds of thousands of people in their organizations, I'm focusing an awful lot on the small and medium-sized businesses, and my find, even whether they are the founders or second or third generation or they're outside people. They are far, far too busy working in the business to work on
Yes.
the business.
Yes.
And
And it becomes almost a badge of right of honor. I work in my business. And when
That's
they
right.
get that mindset, oh my God, when they just like will not think long-term strategic, then it's like, I don't know what else to do.
and that's where the external consultants can help. Because for an example, I said, if you can't take the time to do it right the first time, how are you ever going to fix whatever it is that you've damaged? And if we're talking about humans, they don't put up with it. They will be at your competitors. If you do not invite them into your house and let them thrive, they will be at your competitors,
Right.
and they will thrive. Someone will get them aligned.
Yeah. Hey, alignment, important word in my model too. All the elements need to be aligned. Great. Well, thank you, Dale. Thank you to our listeners. Those of you who joined us, this is it's a John Firth. It's actually, I call this Firth and Friends. But I like to have people really think deeply about things like the human experience, what makes the company great, performance, and so forth. And next week, we're going to have a rebroadcast of a session I did about 7 months ago, about sales and the importance of the pipeline to sales. So likewise, there's importance of being able to attract good talent, nurture the talent, have the talent be loyal and stick with you. You have the same thing with obviously your customers. You have a pipeline of customers, and they better like your product and they better feel loyal to you. And that also has to do with the company's why. So often with my people, I say once they discover their why and the why of their company, it's both for recruitment and for sales. You should be able to live regardless of what outside party you're courting, it's the same core values over and over again.
Very true. Very true.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you. And
And thank you, John.